Hello, this is Vincent. In this episode, we're going to be looking at my Space Marine Epic 40k collection, here at Bunker 6. Hello, and welcome to episode 3. This is the first in a series of episodes where I'll be covering the 3 different armies I have in my Epic 40k collection. And as you can see, these models are substantially smaller than what most people would associate with Warhammer 40k. This is because, as the name would suggest, Epic was supposed to deliver epic scale battles. Rather than dealing with a few squads on a tabletop, Epic would cover armies in their thousands on the battlefield. And off the battlefield, 6mm scale to me is just brilliant. And here are a few of the reasons why I feel this way. Number 1, transportation. Now let's say I wanted to take my full-scale Tau army on public transport. Well, that's going to be a nightmare and terrifying. Who knows by the time I get to my local hobby shop if half the models are still in one piece. Whereas with 6mm scale, yes, things could break, but on the whole, you're dealing with much more compact, light, and small models. Number 2, the cost. My goodness, the amount of money you save and time you save painting these models. They still represent the exact same things as they would if they were in their 28mm scale, but you can get a lot more painted with a lot less paint. The amount of paint that you would need to paint probably 2 Intercessor Marines, you could actually paint half a company with in epic scale. Now, some would say quality is always over quantity, and Epic kind of throws this out of the window, but it really depends on what you're trying to get out of the hobby. For me, I'm not too concerned about minor details on singular figures, such as special characters, and this is because Epic still gives you large figures to work with. There's just less of them, for example, Gargants for the Orcs, and Titans for the Imperial Guard. Now, I don't want to bag on 28mm scale too much, but the last point that I'll make has really got to do with the world that is being conveyed in the battles. And in an age of 3D printing, I think Epic has got the edge. Now, 28mm scale is a hell of a lot of fun. The only problem is, a lot of it's sort of street level, you're in ruins, and it's quite macro. Whereas with Epic, you can zoom out. You're not just fighting on a street corner, you're fighting in a city. And you can show that city on the same table with the same space. And it does a much better job of conveying all the illustrations that you see of the battles and the artwork of the codices and on the box arts of all the different products that GW has. And I feel that being able to zoom out the way in which 6mm allows you to do really hits home the idea of the dramatic space opera that the 40k lore is trying to convey. Now you will notice that a lot of these models are not painted, some of them are base coated, but nothing really past that point. That is because this video is to just show you what I have, and then we will go on to painting them in future episodes. The way in which I'll be painting these models is as the Imperial Fists. This might seem strange considering I collect 28mm scale vintage Dark Angels, but here's the thing, when you're dealing with models this small, I want them to pop, and yellow is a great color that pops. And these past few models are actually character stands, which are quite rare. Now, these models are Terminators, but there are a couple of variations of these models. These are the metal version. Hooter to be specific, or white metal. Now, that's not really an issue, but what's slightly confusing is most models, when you think of metal, are in the earlier years of Games Workshop, yet these Terminator infantry were actually released for Epic Armageddon, which was the final version of Epic. It was originally found in the Stompers box set and the Space Marine Legion box set from the 80s, which seems odd to me. Why not just re-release the plastic ones? From what I can tell, the details are basically the same. I actually think I prefer the plastic versions over the metal versions due to them being a little bit more uniform in their finish. And once they're painted, it's going to be very difficult to tell which ones are metal and which ones are not, unless you pick them up. All of these Terminator stands have actually already had their sand basing put on, but I slightly regret doing that because I was being impatient and I wanted to finish one group of models with some basing. I feel the sand lacks variation, but I may try and address this in the future. I adore the Terminator, as it was one of the first 28mm models that I took interest in, and this is because it was the key protagonist in the game Space Hulk. And although this particular super soldier was slow and cumbersome, it made up for this in droves by being able to teleport on the battlefield. Now we have a few different infantry stands here. This is a Devastator squad, and you can tell this by the two large weapons, and this is a commander stand, and this is because there is a commander in the middle. Now, the great thing about the Devastator squads, aside from the fact that they add a little bit of visual variation to your Space Marine army, they actually offer very good heavy weaponry support for tactical and assault squads. And out of all of the Space Marine infantry units, the Devastator squad had the highest close combat damage points. Now, you can't have a good army without good leadership, and this is where the commander stands come in. They are absolute veterans who've served the Emperor across the universe, and are chosen to lead based upon their incredible feats of bravery, courageousness, and resolute loyalty to the Imperium of Man. Although 6mm scale is small and lacks detail, GW still went to the hassle of sculpting 4 different commanders that you can use from the rule set. These 4 different commander types are Captains, Librarians, Chaplains, and Supreme Commanders. Some of these models have been stripped and some of them have not, or some have just been partially stripped. I'm not too concerned. I can always buy more of these infantry off eBay at a pretty low price, but these are the ones that I have for now, and they'll do just fine when it comes to the painting process. You'll also notice that these are actually sitting on the rectangular style bases rather than the original Space Marine square bases. And when I really fell in love with Epic, which was in 1997, that is when the rectangular bases were introduced. I just prefer it aesthetically. I like seeing all the models in a row. Also, painting them is much easier when they're in a row rather than when they're in a square, because you have a model trapped in the middle that is very hard to reach otherwise. Here we have the Space Marine bikes. These are from the 3rd edition, that's the 1997 edition. These are, as you can tell, made of plastic, and they are mounted to the 1997 edition rectangular infantry bases. They've had their holes filled in, and I was going to cover them in sand and be done with it. But I wasn't really happy with the fact that the plastic was in 2 pieces and I would have had to have filled the gaps on both sides, and that would have been very irritating and most likely fallen apart. You'll also notice that there's actually a little bit of construction plastic holding everything underneath that also didn't have a particularly neat finish. So I tried to find an alternative, and I have come up with a one-piece solution, and I will be rebasing all of these bikes on that solution in a later date. Another thing that I'm going to do is actually try and fix all of the mold lines on these bikes because they're quite off-putting. They run right through the center of the model, and although it's going to involve me having to scrape some paint off, I think it's going to be worth it in the long run, so I get a nice, clean finish on the surface rather than what I have right now. What's slightly strange is, in the Epic 40k battle book on page 31, GW even state they didn't make bases for cavalry or bike units. Instead, they suggested simply cutting card to a 40mm by 20mm size. In my humble opinion, this was a mistake, and that's simply because of continuity. I don't want to have my infantry based one way, and then my bikes and cavalry based another. The other problem is, the original bases had a 45-degree bevel around the edges of them, and in all of the official published materials in regards to cavalry or bikes, they were only ever sitting on thin card, and that just doesn't feel right to me. The white substance on some of the motorbike bases is Liquitex modeling paste, and that will be removed when I remove the bases too. Now, as a quick aside, I do want to apologize for making the edit in this video quite choppy and fast, but I did want to show every actual model that I had in my collection rather than just one of each. And that did actually bump up the video time by quite a lot, and so I tried my best to make the edits as short as possible between each model that I was showing. Here we have 4 FORUMWARE Land Raider models. Now, I do own the official ones too, so I feel like my conscience is clear on this one. As I've previously mentioned, I only pick up FORUMWARE generally if GW never release the model themselves, but I do have a series of the official Land Raiders too, so I feel not too bad about it. This is a partially assembled epic scale drop pod. I don't actually have the fins or anything in shot, but they'll be coming later on in another video. And we've got a big collection of dreadnoughts now. I'm not too sure if I'm going to keep the dreadnoughts on these bases, but we shall see. And I'm going to tap out from talking for now, just so you guys can enjoy the dreadnoughts. You know how I feel about these little guys. I absolutely love them. Enjoy. Now on to the official Land Raiders by GW. They of course look very similar to the FORUMWARE, but the major differences are there isn't a Space Marine popping out the top on the official GW Land Raider, the sponsons are quite different, and there are some minor bodywork detail differences too. But on the whole, they look very similar. I think I do prefer the official GW Land Raider though, and that will just simply be because I'm not a huge fan of the sponsons on the FORUMWARE version. Now you'll see that most of these Land Raiders have actually already been base coated, and this is Avalan Sunset of course, the colour that GW recommends that you base coat all of your models in if you're trying to follow the Imperial Fist colour scheme. All I'm doing is following the official paint method for Imperial Fists, but if I was a more confident painter I'd actually attempt to try and do the 1997 version of the colour method. I can't find any recipes for it, but I actually just prefer the yellow finish from the 1997 Imperial Fist Epic promotional material that I found. It's just a little bit more yellow and a little less synthetic looking, but with practice I'm sure I'll figure it out. One of the terms for vindicate is to defend, maintain, or insist on the recognition of one's rights. And this is the Vindicator tank, and I think it sure as hell lives up to its name. Out of all of the heavy support tracked vehicles, I think the Vindicator is my favourite, and although this is just basically a Rhino on steroids, the Demolisher cannon and the shovel on the front just look so badass. I'm a huge fan. This is the last iteration that came in epic scale for the Vindicator. There are two other versions. I actually do prefer the 1997 version, which will be coming up later in the video. And the reason why I prefer the 1997 version is it just has a little bit more detail. It has sort of packs and sandbags all over it and fabric rolls. And it's things like that that I think really help sell the setting a little bit more than this model does. Now if I was a supreme hobbyist, I could of course just use green stuff and make my own additions, but I'm definitely not confident enough to do that. And we have an unofficial STORMTALON gunship, but you could think this is an official one. It is such an accurate sculpt, it's unbelievable. Fantastic little sculpt. It's a real shame that GW never released one themselves, but I've got my fingers crossed that maybe they might release an Aeronautica Imperialis version in the future. And although the releases have been somewhat patchy, I will say that every single sculpt that GW and Forge World have put out for the recent version of Aeronautica Imperialis has been fantastic. Complete top-of-the-line sculpt. Very happy with everything that they've been doing there. And some might say I'm being greedy, but I just would love to see every single flyer from the 40k universe end up in Aeronautica Imperialis. That would be fantastic. And once again, these are just based on resin bases that I picked up off eBay. Now we have a bag of bikes. These are the final iteration of the bikes. The reason why I have so many is because you need 3 per base for a squadron, so it's good to have a fair amount of these. And once again, these will be based just like the other plastic bikes that I have on new custom bases. And because GW hasn't really changed their designs too much in the last 20 years, things like these attack bikes and these bike squadrons are pretty much the exact same models in the 28mm scale today, which is fantastic. And you'll also note that there's even more details on these 6mm scale bikes than you'd even find in the 28mm scale, with their little luggage packs on the side and on the top of their vehicles. Fantastic details. Now I must apologize for not showing every single one of the bikes that I have. There were just so many, it would have been completely pointless to show every single one. Now we have the last metal Thunderhawk that was ever released. This is the 1997 version. There was a previous version. Now why do I make such a stipulation on the metal point? Well, there are other Thunderhawks, but they're made in resin and they're released by Forge World. This exact style of model was carried from the 1997 Epic 40,000 release into the 2003 Epic Armageddon release. You'll find the exact model in both books with the exact same Imperial Fist paint job. I do have 2 of these unassembled and unpainted, and I'm very much looking forward to finishing them in the near future. Now let's jump back in time and look at the very first plastic Rhino. Now, there have been many iterations of this, from Epic Titans all the way up to Epic Armageddon, but this particular version is just from the original Epic 40k box game. And this model is the Whirlwind, and it too is from the original Epic 40k box set. This model was upgraded in the 2003 Epic Armageddon release, as was the Rhino and the Land Raider, along with other vehicles. Now we actually have the final set of vehicles that were released with Epic 40k for the Space Marines, which are the Land Raiders. These are missing their las gun sponsons, but are in this little baggie. Next we have 3 Annihilators and 5 Destructors from the 2003 release. This is a 1997 Epic 40k Land Raider Commander tank, not to be confused with the regular Land Raiders. And this model is just teeming with detail. So many little things to pop out on this model, and for such a small size to have so much detail is absolutely fantastic. And here are the aforementioned 1997 release Razorbacks. Look at all the details on this little tank. It's the size of my thumb, and the amount of things they managed to pack in on this is just absolutely remarkable. Fantastic sculpts. And here we have 8 of the Epic 40k 1997 release Landspeeder Tornadoes. Lovely sculpts. And here is the 2003 Landspeeder Tornado release for Epic Armageddon. I have 5 of these. And here we have a Predator Annihilator, but with the addition of the sponsons on the side. And this is the 2003 Epic Armageddon release. And here are some additional Destructors and Annihilators that I forgot to put in the video earlier. Well, that was the Space Marines. I hope you enjoyed the episode. We have some very exciting episodes coming up, which include the Imperial Guard next, and finally, my Orc collection. Oh boy, there are a lot of models to get through, and a lot of models to finish. And speaking of things being finished, this episode is finished, and I thoroughly appreciate you watching to the end, and I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, maybe consider dropping a thumbs up. And if you're new here and want to see more tiny little figures to be painted, please consider subscribing to Bunker 6. It would be really appreciated. And I want to also say a big thank you to all the new subscribers and commenters who've jumped on board so far. Thank you very much. It's been great reading all of your comments. I hope that I can try and keep these videos to 1 a week. If not, we'll see. I've just had a second son as of 2 days ago, so things are going to be a little bit hectic here at the bunker, but we'll try our best. Anyway, I've been Vincent, signing off from here at Bunker 6.